Welcome everyone. We're going to paint the Pansy still life, and this is really a fun little painting. It's a little detailed, but I will take you through it step by step. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to paint my design on a wood panel. You can paint this on any surface you choose. You can use a canvas. I sometimes like the wood panel for the smooth surface that I get. So you can see this is just a regular wood panel here. What I do when I get these is I sand it a little bit. I put a coat or two of gesso on, and then I do another light sand. I have a nice smooth surface ready here to take the paint. This particular painting, we're going to once again use a quinacridone magenta background and paint on top. You can see little bits of this pink showing through, which really makes a nice vibrant painting. So that's why I have not traced my design on yet. So what I'm going to do is I'll put my sample here, and I'm going to just put a wash of quinacridone magenta. I really like the Liquitex magenta here. I like a lot of the Liquitex colors. They're just a step up from the craft paints, and they're really not more expensive because these are 4-ounce bottles, and your craft paints, and there are colors that I use in the craft paints too, are 2-ounce. So there are a few colors, and I'll show you as I go along the ones that I really like because I can mix a great many colors from them without having a lot of different paints. Let's just start with the wash. I'm just using a 1-inch acrylic brush here. It's nothing fancy. And I'm simply going to take some water and get a wash here, just wash on the quinacridone. Now, you do not have to do a perfect coat. You don't have to cover it well. You can have streaks. I just want a transparent wash of quinacridone on here. Doesn't take much time at all, and it's a nice way to get started. Then afterwards, we'll trace our design on, and we will go from there, step by step, like I said. And it's just a fun spring painting or painting for any time. And this will give you the techniques of how to paint the pansies and some nice quick leaves that you can incorporate to other paintings. You can customize this one as well. You could change up the cup or the mug. You could put it in a special mug or replicate a piece of grandma's china or something for the cup. So remember to really always incorporate what you something personal to you in your paintings to make it your own. It doesn't have to look just like mine, and that's not the point. We want it to look just like yours. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we're going to go ahead and sketch our design on. Okay, our wash has dried. We're going to trace on our pattern now, and I'm just going to center mine and tape it down to trace on. Sometimes it would tend to slip, so I do want to tape it to make sure it's where I want it. I'm just kind of eyeballing it here, and I'm just going to tape it down. You guys probably know how to do this, but I figured I'd record it as we go along, because I know sometimes some of my tips and things that I like to use I've mentioned in the past, but maybe all of you have not heard that. So I do like the transfer paper made by Cheryl. It seems to work much better than what I have been able to find in some of the craft shops. So Cheryl, I really like. You can use it over and over. The more you use it, almost the better it is. I've had pieces for years and years, and it still works well. I usually keep it in the graphite color here and then also in white. And I usually use a mechanical pencil or a pen with a fine point so that I don't have big smudgy bits of the graphite going onto my painting, and I just simply trace over my design. Do test it first. Make sure you have the right side down. Many times I've done it. I've traced it, and this has been the wrong side. It's usually easy to tell. It's the more graphite side that you want down. And then I just go ahead and trace this whole pattern on, and that just gives us some guidelines. I don't really supply the tracer with every little tiny detail because I don't want you to have too much work tracing things on. We're going to get just the rough outlines and then go ahead and paint. Okay, so you can see my design is traced on. I know it's a little hard to see on the video, but you can see that. So I've got my design here, and we're going to just start. I've got my acrylic colors out, and the colors just that I'm using today are white and buttermilk. I really like the Deco Art Buttermilk. I use that for a lot. It's kind of just like a soft ivory color. If you don't have that, you can certainly mix your white with a little bit of the yellow or deep ochre, just that gold color. So in the Deco Art colors I'm using in this painting, and remember, I'm telling you what I use, but whatever you have, just match the colors the best you can. It does not have to, you don't have to run out and buy these colors. Just use what you have. And I just like to tell you what I'm using. So in Deco Art, I've got the deep ochre. It's just a nice yellow ochre color. Prussian blue I really like a lot. We can also just use our Payne's Gray and a little phthalo blue and mix up a similar navy blue color. And in the Liquitex paints, which I was telling you that I really like, especially these three. If you're only going to get three, I would recommend the phthalo blue, the phthalo green, the primary yellow. I've tried every craft paint out there, and I just cannot get a pure color like these for mixing. If I mix the blue and the green, I get a gorgeous array of teals and turquoises. You could bypass the green if you wanted to for leaves and things. I use the primary yellow in the phthalo blue. You get a lot of shades of green, or you can just mix up the phthalo green with the primary and get shades as well. I'll show you how to get darker shades as we go along. I like the orange in the Liquitex as well. We've used a little bit of that out, and of course the quinacridone magenta. So these are the colors. And Payne's Gray, that's another one that I use a lot. Don't like black a lot of times in my paintings. I like to paint really colorful, and Payne's Gray just is more of a blue black, so that is kind of nice for me. I like that a little bit of color there. So we're going to just do our background first. Many times, most times, I'm always the background working forward. So in this painting, let's get our background in, and then we'll probably do a tablecloth, and then the cup, and then the flowers, pansies over it, because you can see the pansies are overlapping. So whatever's closest to me, I will do last. And I'm just going to use that same brush, any wide, flat brush you have, you want to use for your background. Now, the background, you can make it a little rough, like I'm going to, seeing your brush strokes. But if you prefer a smoother background, you will just kind of brush them a little more and make it smooth. We don't want the background to be so busy that it takes away from our design. So we want it to be subtle, but I don't want it to be boring either. So how I'm going to start is I'm taking just a little bit of that Prussian blue, or like I said, you can just take a little Payne's Gray in your phthalo and mix it with your white. So I don't want it quite that dark. So I'm going to get that on my brush. And can you see these strokes? I want to leave some pink showing through. Sometimes I tend to cover it up too much, and then I go back and put some pink in after. But I'm just going to go, and I might thin that paint down a little bit. It's a little bit dry. I want it a little more transparent and move for me a little bit. So I'm just doing, can you see it's almost like a crisscross stroke? Again, you can use any kind of motion. You might want a circular stroke. I just want something that's not back and forth. Back and forth like that is great if I'm painting water, but if I'm painting something like this, I want it to be just a little bit less, like a little bit more to it, so that it kind of it entertains your eye a little bit. And if I have light areas and dark areas, it's fine. I'm not trying to get it perfectly covered. Now, if I wanted a little lighter, I could just take this dirty brush, go right into the white a little bit, and just give it a little bit of texture there. So that's simply what I'm going to do my background. And I'm just going into, if I find it's a little light, I'm going to take just the tiniest little corner of that blue into my white up here and go right along. Now, don't worry about going right in over your flowers. Again, I like to leave some pink showing, but we can see our tracing right through. So, and I've thinned my paint a little bit. So don't worry about trying to go around the flowers and spending all the time there. Just go ahead and get a little bit of that background in. In the cup handle, you can use a smaller brush. You'll see me using a flat brush a lot because I can use it for a nice wide stroke, but I'm just using the little tip here on the corner to get that little area in. So you will see me using a variety of flat brushes as we paint. And I will use some round details and liners as well. Okay. And I do have this a little thin, so if you find the paint is dragging like mine was in the beginning, just add a few drops of water. And then you can step back and think, okay, this is a little too transparent. I can put a little more pigment on there. I like the glow that the pink is giving me through. But if you want to do, like I said, a little lighter area in one spot, I'm just kind of feathering. It's almost like I'm feathering that brush on top to get those strokes. Every time I do this, the painting is a little different. So keep that in mind when you're trying to look at your painting and say, oh, it doesn't look like hers. It doesn't look like someone else's. It's not supposed to. You want it to look like yours. And if I tried to get it exact as the sample, that's not going to really happen. It always comes out a little different. So I'm just going to wash that brush out now. And we're going to hop right down and do our tablecloth. Tablecloth has stripes. The stripes run this way a little bit. If you want, you could give yourself a little pencil line where they are going. I'm just going to freehand it, but feel free to do a light pencil line. And again, I make the tablecloth a little wonky on purpose. That way, a little, if you're doing it real realistic and you just do one little bit of wonkiness, something's off. But I'm going to kind of have a playful, colorful painting here. So I think I'm going to I'll use this wide brush for my wide stripes. So the white stripes are the wide ones. I'm going to do a transparent wash of white first. So I've got my brush. It's been cleaned. It's just got some water on it. Take some white. And I'm just going to get it so that's a wash. I will go over this a number of times, but I want to start as a wash because if it's a big, heavy, opaque line of color and it's not exactly where you want it, it's easier if it's a light wash. So let's just start with just a little stroke here where our big stripes are going to be. And we're just going to leave a little line between so we know where we're going to put that purple stroke. And this is just a little guide. Like I said, you can make a little sketch first if you want. I'm using these stripes just about the width of this brush. So I'm going to turn my painting in my sample here so I can see it a little bit. And this is just a little guide. And like I said, we'll go a little heavier. And you can see I'm just leaving little spaces in between or right over those flowers that are there. As you need to, just dip into your water, just a little tiny drop on there. And then stripes coming this way, and then it's going to fall straight down the tablecloth here. It's very light, I know. You can go even a little heavier than this, but at least it gives me an idea. So now I'm going to go a little heavier. Just go right over that. And I'm just building up. A lot of elements in this painting are going to be building up a few layers to get the look that we want. And I think on this one, I think on my original, I did more of an angle. Like, I don't think it really matters. And I have a fan here on, so my paint is drying out pretty fast. So I am adding water many times when I go to pick up the color. Okay, here's a little more defined on where our stripes are. And now I want to leave it a little washy, but in places I'm going to get it brighter. So I'm going to clean this brush off. I'm going to go to a smaller brush now, and I'm going to let that dry in between. It's drying so fast because I have the fan on. So just let that dry before you go to the next step. And now I'm going to go right into the paint full strength. Just going to hit the paint here and there. Just hit the stripes. I want little highlights in places. I'm trying to not make it uniform. So sometimes I'll kind of go across this way and almost little determined marks. And you can start with a few and then build up. You don't want to cover every bit that we just did of that transparent white with the heavier white. You want it to you can almost see now how it's starting to give you little highlights. And sometimes I will do across where the table edge is. Sometimes I will do some horizontal marks there. And I will leave some like this, and then I'll come back when this is dry and even do more that are heavier. So let's just leave that for a minute, let that dry. What we're going to do now on the tablecloth is we're going to start with our little purple and pink stripes. Again, you could change the color of this tablecloth up to whatever you like, but I like the way the purple really ties in with the pansies, and the few yellow pansies that we have scattered in there really pop. And the reason why is yellow and purple are complementary colors. They're opposite on the color wheel. And sometimes you can use that to your advantage to make elements or parts of your design really pop. So sometimes I think about that when I'm designing a painting and the color palette I want to use. That's also why I don't sometimes use many colors. I'll have a limited palette and I'll mix these colors amongst them each other, make a cohesive painting. If you start adding in every color you have, it gets a little bit hard for your eye to look at the painting. This way it's kind of you don't know sometimes why it's so appealing, but it's because you have a limited palette and your colors are more cohesive and you're thinking a little bit about color theory and using your complementary colors. So I'm going to get a purple now. Here's the thing. You can use some of your purples you might have, or you can just mix a beautiful purple up with your quinacridone magenta and your phthalo blue. These make beautiful, beautiful purples. So I'm just mixing up a dark purple here. I'm going to add a tiny drop of water because I want this, again, a little see-through when I start. And I don't want to be sitting here trying to say, I'm going to paint the perfect line. No. Line, stop, start. Just kind of get it kind of rough. You don't want it to be perfect. And I want it a little see-through. So if it's not, I'll add a little water more to that. That might be a little bit peeking through there. I know I have some pansies on top here. We'll paint those right over. Okay, so there's the start for our dark stripes. Then next to it, I have a thinner stripe along the edge. I could just actually use this brush and use the chisel edge, or you could go and use a liner brush. And I'm going to go straight, not thin down, quinacridone, because it's a little transparent anyway. And on the right side of this stripe, I'm just going to go and do a heavier quinacridone stripe just beside that. Can you see how I'm really painting loose on purpose? I like the look of it. It's fun to do. You're not struggling, measuring, and trying to do perfect little stripes. Just kind of quick and easy. While I have that quinacridone on my brush, I might take a little bit of white, mix up a little bit of a light pink. You know, and some of these, it's a little bit too white. I'm going to go a little pinker. On top of some of the purple, I might just do a little pink highlight. Tying all that together. And we're going to let that go for a minute. If it dries, if you've got a lot of water in there and it's really transparent, mine is not so much, but if you wanted to at this point go with just a straight purple here and there and get a little bit of a darker area. And afterwards, when this dries, we're going to give our shadow under our cup and saucer there. Okay, let's just leave that as is. Let me just pull it up. You can see it a little closer. It's just painterly and broken lines and broken color. So there we have. We've got our background done. We've got our tablecloth done. How simple was that tablecloth? And I want to do my little shadow under here, but I don't dare do it until that's all dry. So what we're going to do in the meantime, let's hop up here and do some leaves. Now, let me bring the camera down a little bit so that you can just see that a little closer, because we're just going to work on the leaves there. Now, I have traced some leaves on. We had some leaves in our tracers. They're kind of covered a little bit. You can still see them, but I don't want you to be so tight into finding each leaf. I'm just going to show you how to do some one-stroke leaves. We're going to stick them in back there. You can use this as a guide. And then in between some of the pansies, there is a little bit of a green background. We'll just dab that in, and that will give us the background. And then we'll do our pansies on top. When our pansies are done, we can always overlay some leaves as well, because we want this to be a bouquet and not just they're all flat laid out. So that's why we have to do some things behind and on top, and we layer. But let's just get into some really easy and quick flat leaves, not flat leaves. We want dimensional leaves. And so you can get, like I said, you can get a beautiful green. I want you to see this close up, but I do like you to see my palette a little bit. And so we have, let's just get this moved up here. Here's the green here, the phthalo blue, the yellow. You could get your yellow and blue and get some beautiful greens. Look at that, beautiful colors there. I want to start with a darker leaf, working up to a brighter leaf on top. Those leaves are a little closer to us. They're a little lighter, but I also use that as kind of a design element too. So just to make, if the leaves behind weren't really dark, then your light ones wouldn't really pop and make such an impact. So here's a trick. You can even darken your green a little more. When you want to darken or dull down a color, you could just use its complement. So here we have another way to use our complement. I'll take the quinacridone red and green, and you add that in there, and you're going to get a nice dark green shade. I'm going to do some in the back that are simply just strokes. I'm going to just take my flat brush. I'm going to press it, wiggle it a little bit. Now I'm twisting it to the chisel edge and making a leaf. Practice these. What we're doing on here is you don't have to be perfect, so it's kind of like press and twist, press and twist, press and twist. Sometimes I press, give it a little wiggle for some shape. And you can just, it's fun to take just a piece of paper and just practice a whole page of these. You could get thinner, longer leaves. You could get little vines. So we're going to do those to start. There's just that very dark green. The harder you press down your brush, the wider leaf you're going to get. You can use different size brushes too. I can even come in and do some really tiny ones with that. We're not going to worry about the leaves on top of the cups yet. We're going to throw those in afterwards. Let's just get some leaves up here while we're waiting for this to dry. Then we'll go ahead actually and paint our cup and saucer. Then we'll go and do the rest of the brighter leaves and the pansies. So I just want you to practice these a little bit. So you just press and pull. These are just going to be background filler. But sometimes you could take one and put it out a little further. And on top of those, we'll do a middle shade of green and then a lighter shade even. So I'm just getting some green in there. I just want to show you that little stroke. And I sometimes now will just go ahead and put them wherever I want. I'm not going by my design so much. And in between, and you can look at your reference photo for this guide, just in between, some are going to be a little green, like where there's a little space between some of the flowers. And this could actually wait till after we get the cup done, and then we could do all of them. But I just wanted to show you that little technique. This is dry now, so I want to get that shadow in under the cup. So let's just raise this a bit. And I'm going to, I always have 2 cups of water with me here. I have one that's clean and one that I'm using to rinse. And then the clean one sometimes I will use when I want to do some washes and things. I'll have a clean water. And I want to do a bit of a wash underneath here for the shadow. And I'm going to just take a flat brush. I'm not going to use the big wide flat brush. I want a little more control, but that one would work too. I'm taking a flat brush, I've wet it. It's not dripping, it's just got a little water on there. And I want to just take a darker shade, Prussian blue, dark blue of some sort underneath here. And how I'm doing this wash, and you'll see this technique a lot, and you guys, some of you already know this technique. It's just a wet brush. Taking the dark that I want to use on the corner. I don't want to go straight onto my board now, though. I really want to just pat that off a little bit first, just to blend it a bit. If I find I have too much water on there, I could just dab that side off. And I'm going to just get my shadow right along the bottom there. So I'm just going to go right along the edge of that cup. Saucer, rather, not cup. The cup is sitting on top of the saucer. And there's my shadow. And if it's not really blended really well, you can just dry your brush off and come back and smooth that out. I want it a little deeper, closer to the saucer, so I'll probably go back in with a Payne's Gray on top. I think this needs to wrap around here. Notice my saucer is kind of wonky looking. Again, like on the tablecloth stripes, I wanted to keep it a little irregular so that your eye was not trying to make it perfect. Some of those saucers and those old tea sets are a little bit curved. So there we have that. I want to let it dry before I go in and darken it. But you know what I want to do too? I'm going to do the same technique under where the little bit of pansy petals and leaves are down here. So I'm just going to go under. I can see it a little bit through the tracing. And I'm just going to go under where, sorry about that, under where the other things are sitting on top. It casts a little shadow, taking no time at all to dry, but let's let it dry a bit before we just get a little deeper right under the edge of the saucer. And let's just base coat our cup and saucer. So I'm going to just take a little bit of the buttermilk, almost a little bit thinned down. I don't want it to cover solid, but I want to get a little of this antique-y ivory under my white cup. So let's just go on there. And again, keep in mind sometimes that you want to leave little bits of the pink showing, especially on like edges of the flowers where things meet. So that's why I'm not being super careful. I'm going to get my edge correct. It doesn't have to be perfect because I still like some pink showing through there. I certainly can see right through for the designs that I've sketched. So just fill in your cup and saucer. Not taking too much time. Sometimes if we take too much time, we start getting a little bit fussy and the painting shows that. So let's just kind of glide right along here with our saucer. Don't worry about even going right to the end. We're going to have a little metallic gold trim on that saucer, and then you can use a smaller brush, or you can simply use your chisel edge for that handle. Just a little whisper of ivory under our white. And this is dried. The wood seems to dry pretty quick as well. Like I said, I have a fan on me there. I'm going to go in and get just the same technique, the wet brush, but I'm going into the Payne's Gray this time. But work that off. You don't want too much. I'd almost rather you go and have it really light, too light almost, but then you can always go back and add more layers. This is just getting it a little darker up close to the saucer there. The Payne's Gray, like I said, is just a little darker than the Prussian blue. And if it needs to be done again, then that's when you just let it dry. Oh, and let's just do it again. A little bit of that under where our petals and little bits of pansies. The pansies down here aren't going to be full face-on pansies like these. They're almost like they're flattened out on the tabletop, or they're a little crushed, or they're just petals and not the entire flower. So that's what we're going to do there. And now we have our cup is dry. Now I'm going to use just the white on top. And I want to get almost like there's like little segments here, which we'll define next. For now, let's just take white on our brush. I can get the white right over here on the handle. And again, this is going to be a little case with this cup is the layers that we're going to do. So I'm going to almost divide it in these little sections as I'm just brushing my paint on. So I'm curving on the edges, right? When I get to the center, it's going to be straighter. So if I curve here, skip the tiniest space, get a little straighter. This is just a rough guide of where our little division shadows are going to be. The saucer, I kind of do it this way. I do a little section. Curved, it's going to get straighter as it gets straight on. And can you see I'm not really worried, not fussing too much. I want this to stay loose and colorful, not tight and fussy. Then we have just the bottom of the little cup has these little sections here. Actually, that's more like it, I think. And I want it to be a little heavier white. So I'm going to just do as many coats as I need to get it a little brighter. I'm going to go one more over here on the handle. The handle is super light. And again, like I said, you could use a smaller square flat brush or a round brush if you wanted to. This is going to give it a little heavier. I'm just loading that paint up without being watered down. And I'm just going to go over what I did again, just real quick. And when this dries, we are going to wash in like a bluey, Prussian blue, watered down wash just for some of the shadows. And then we're going to kind of go back and forth. I'm going to go over it again, hit it with some ivory in places. Like the tablecloth, loose and fun. We'll get a shadow underneath there before we paint those leaves and flowers. And I know it looks detailed. You look at the little cup and it's got a little painting on it, like it's a little porcelain teacup that has a little design on it, some highlights, and makes it look a little shiny. But we're doing it kind of rough and loose. So I need this to dry now, my white. And it's just the tiniest bit. It'll just take a minute. So we're going to use a little wash in there to separate the little sections, cast shadows from the pansies. We're going to do that with the wet, clean brush. Let's do our shadow up here first, where we're going to kind of side load the wet brush. So I've just got the wet brush again, a little bit of Prussian blue, and always just tap it out. And sometimes I realize it's very wet. I'll just take that off. And now I'm going to just do what we did under here. We're going to just kind of follow this design roughly. Don't worry about being perfect. It's just going to be a little shadow. We can put more leaves, whatever we want there. And that's our little wash. So it's pretty simple, almost in one stroke. It's just a wet paintbrush, a little pigment on the edge, pat it out and shade. So that's what I'm going to do here on this cup and saucer. So I've done it underneath there. I want to do it under. Actually, there's a little bit of like the saucer here that's sort of the flat part. So we'll just put a little dark there. It's going to have a little shadow under here. And then you'll see the little base of the cup has another little shadow there. My paintbrush is a little bit too watery, so I'm going to pull out a little there. And we need that a little darker under. We need it a little darker over here, so I'll just get my brush loaded. Actually, I kind of forgot, and I didn't trace this on, but there's a little pansy down here. I'm going to leave, and that needs to have a little shading under it as well. Same with this one. There's a little pansy here. So I'm just going to go under there, under the cup itself. When I find it's dragging, I just reload it a little bit. And I kind of repat over in the same little section where I was getting that extra color off there. Behind there, maybe the cup. Actually, let's go right around this whole little pansy here, because this is on top. And I will, when it's dry, do the same thing we did onto here. I'm going to wet the brush and just take the tiniest bit of Payne's Gray. And just to get it a little darker, just close up to the objects that are casting the shadow. Same here. And I can come back anytime I want and deepen these. I'm going to divide that into two little sections after. Now I do want to get the little spaces in between those little sections of the cup. And those I don't have to really side load so much because they're just going to, I'm just taking a little bit of washy Prussian blue, and I can just divide those sections up. Same here. Actually, we'll have a little bit of a shadow here behind the cup on the saucer. And then again, we're just kind of dividing up little sections here. Sometimes they're not even following where I left the little space, but there. So that's really just in the Prussian blue now. I'm going to incorporate a little purple into this later too, but that's the start of where we are with our cup. So let's bring up a little. I should have done it without rinsing my brush, but I'm going to bring up a little bit of a wash from the bottom of that cup. I can even bring this down a little bit if it's not dark enough. The handle should have a little wash on the edge. Let me get that. A little shadow on one side. Doing it on the inside there a little bit. Exactly where our little metallic gold rim is going to go anyway. Okay, I want to get back in here and just define this a little more. This is two sections, and I sort of lost one. That's okay, because we're going to go with our white on top. Okay, now we're going to just put in some colors. We're going to get it a little whiter in places. Sometimes I just put a little pink and purple on that cup just as a little reflection. The cup's shiny. It's porcelain or ceramic, and it would take some of the colors around it, and it would shine. But for now, let's just go. And maybe I'll take a little bit of my buttermilk first and just in a few places just put some dabs. Again, just do it quick without thinking. Otherwise, you're analyzing it, and it's, getting to be too detailed. And then I'm just going to use some white. I want to get it stronger in the middle, for instance, of these little bumps, the little cup, the shape. So I can just I'm going to get a little clean white out now, a little more. And I'm going to go heavier with the paint straight on. And I'm going to just kind of brush down kind of in the middle of these sections. And this is where you want to just step back sometimes. How does it look? Because we're so close working on it here. And like the tablecloth, it's kind of washy, but we're going to build it up as we go. Sometimes if I want to get a little more antique white in there, that little buttermilk helps. And I'm going right in and over these little shadows we brought down. You can still see them a little bit through. And then I'm going to get to my smaller brush because I really like this little section down here and I want it to be seen. So I'm going to just do 2 heavier white lines across there. Okay, then I'm going to take this brush. I don't even have to wash it off. I might get the tiniest bit of a pink here sometimes, just a little bit of a light pink, and I might throw it in some spots. I know the pink is showing through underneath, but sometimes I'll do that. I might even do it with a little bit of purple. Just like it could be like a little reflection or something. And again, I want that white to build up so that it looks even brighter in the middles. And we're going to even do our little floral design and do some white highlights over it. Again, it's going to be like the little shine. Can just go a little heavier in places. Down in the center of these especially. You see I'm doing some stop strokes. Some are more like little dots. Now you can see how that's even a little brighter there. And I like to even go back with some of the shadows if I need to, or highlights. This is needs to be blended a little, and to do that, because we're using white in the ivory, I'm just going to take a little white and just kind of brush over some of the shadows that we put in, just to soften them. Can you see? Let me start on the left side here. You can still see those. See how they're softened a little bit? It's kind of nice. Start real light, and you can build up from there. I can just do some more highlights here and there. Just when I say highlight, I'm just taking solid, pure white, and I'm just dabbing it. I think across here we wanted to get a little highlight, maybe. Okay. Okay, let's get that little bit of floral design on there, and then the metallic gold edges, and I'll show you, instead of just using like a metallic gold paint, we're going to just use our yellow ochre, some shading, and some white highlights, and it's going to just look a little sparkly for us. So to get the little designs, I'm just going to take some of the purpley, some of the blues, really watered down, more like watercolor, because I want it just to be a rough little dabs of color that are going to be like it's painted, but I don't want to take away from the rest of the design. I'm not going to paint it detailed. I'm using a little combination of the purples and the blues. So there might be a little section over here with these flowers. There might be a few little, see, I'm just kind of almost dabbing and some could be a little more flower shapes, but I want to get a little more purple in there. Dab, dab, dab. Rinse off your brush and do the same with some greens. I don't want that dark green with the magenta mixed in. I want it kind of a little lighter, very watery, very washy. If it looks too bright, just add more water. So it's just set far away. I'm going to take just a tiniest bit of yellow ochre now, and almost could be little centers of the flowers. You could just dot a little yellow ochre here and there, and that's all we really need to indicate that there's a little floral pattern on there. Let's outline where we want the gold trim. So I'm going to take a little liner. This is a great little liner. It's a 20-aught liner. I have just found these little liners at the craft stores, art stores. And let's just use straight deep ochre for this. Deep ochre, yellow ochre, whatever color you have. And if you don't have one, you can make a beautiful ochre color with a little bit of your, not your quinacridone magenta so much as your alizarin crimson in your yellow makes a really nice ochre. So I did it on the inside of this handle. So I'm just going to simply do a line where I want that trim to be. I have thinned down my paint. It's thickening because I'm sitting here with the fan on it and it's warm. So that's why I'm adding a lot more water. We're going to do a little gold trim on these little ridges on the little base of the cup, on the very bottom of the cup. So see how we're even just straightening up some of our edges now if they're a little messy, so you don't really have to worry. This edge of the saucer, I'm going to go right around. If it doesn't show up, you can do it, let it dry and do a second coat. This is a fun little tip for metallic items. So it's just the gold. Shows up pretty good. I might not need much of a second coat. Over here where we're painting over that shadow might need a little, but we're going to give this gold, believe it or not, a little shadow. Actually, you know what color I'm going to grab, and I didn't show you in the beginning, was burnt sienna. That beautiful red brown. I want to shade with that a little bit. Just that red brown there. You could use your whatever brown you have and add a little bit of like a brick red to it if you needed to, but it's just kind of a nice color for this to shade and highlight. I want to let that dry a little minute. While we're waiting, why don't we just go back and just put some of those leaves that are overlapping there on the cup. So again, we can mix the blue and the yellow, and if you want it dark, you get a little complementary color. Red or the quinacridone is what we have on our palette, so we'll use that. And I'm just going to get some leaves overlapping here. Now, while I'm waiting for this to dry, let's continue on with our leaves a little bit. Just that dirty brush, I'm going to go with more yellow to get, try to do it on the palette where you can see, because it is handy to see the palette. So I'm getting a little lighter yellow. Primary yellow, all yellows, oranges usually are very transparent, so it might not show up much on top, but then for our next coat, we'll add a little white to it and really get it to pop. So I'm going to do the same little shape with these kind of like almost filler green in the back because it's really a little transparent. So wherever we put some green, just dab some of this lighter green here and there. Again, we're just going to have a dark, we'll have a mid-tone, and then we will get those really nice bright ones. We can add some detail afterwards with a few little vein strokes on top of them. So you can see I'm going like right over some of these just to change the shade of the dark ones. Just dabbing, very loose there. For the ones that we really want to pop now. Oh, and you know what? I keep neglecting our leaves down here. So let's run back and catch up here. Let's just do now that, especially where the cup and saucer is pretty much painted. I can get my leaves down here. These little guys under here have some leaves. I'm almost eyeballing them, but you can just glance at your tracer if you want. And now I'll do the same with the mix with the yellow. Just get a little brighter in between some of those light ones. Trying not to overwork each section, and even for me, it's hard. Sometimes I want to keep fiddling, and sometimes that really doesn't help. It's not good sometimes, so we're going to just kind of go along. Okay, now we want our little leaves that are really going to show up. Now, you could go to a little smaller brush if you wanted. I like to have all the sizes of the flats, but I'm going to stick with this one. So I've got that light green, pretty much what we used before, but we're going to take a tiny bit of white because that is going to make it opaque, and that's going to make the ones closest to us really pop. So if you're using your yellows and your oranges and you're trying to cover something and it's just not covering, and you could do 10 coats of paint, still not covering, what I would do if I was painting something like this dark, but I really needed a super light on top, I would just paint it in white a couple times, and then you can put your light color on top. This technique, I'm just adding a little white to my color, and let's just see how that works. So if I go now, I can get a nice leaf that's really popping. And isn't that a nice little addition? So I'm just going to lay those here and there. Some, if I want to have like a more of a shaped leaf like we did in the very beginning, I could just give it that little shape, that little press and pull. Some leaves could just be almost floating out here in space, a little away from the flowers, because again, it's a bouquet. Look quickly at a bouquet, not stare at it, but look quickly and you'll see all these little bits of color. I'll get some down here. I need a little more white. If it starts to get a little transparent, add a little more white. There. That's all we need. Just a little bit. Just to indicate it. This is pretty much dry. Let's put our burnt sienna on here, do our veins on our leaves, and then we come back and give our little white highlights. I'm going to use my little tiny liner brush again. I'm going to thin down that burnt sienna a bit because I want it as to be a little shadow, not a harsh line. So I'm going to thin it, and I'm going to go on the outside edge. So the outside edge there, just a burnt sienna. And it doesn't have to be a perfectly perfect line. It can kind of just go stop, start on down here. I'm not worried so much if it's on the exact edge. It could be kind of in the middle sometimes. It just kind of get your burnt sienna over on there. There's some nice darks. Let me pull it up so you can see it a little better. It's kind of rough. It's not perfect. Let that dry now. Use the same little brush if you want, or any liner brush for your veins. Liner brushes are nice because you can load a little bit more paint on them, do more strokes without having to reload. So on these liner, when I'm doing a vein on a leaf, I thin my paint down. I'm thinning it over here. I'm just adding a little drop to water to my white. I always work on the petal from the base out to the tip. And these are just little petals and little leaves. So if you're doing more complex, bigger leaf, you'd be more important. But so take this one right here. I start at the base and I work out. And this is very bright. I would like it a little more watered down, but I want you to be able to see it. So then I could just do some little veins. Now, I always work towards me. It's easier for me to just pull that towards me. And I want to keep it really watered down. See, that's a bit bright, but I wanted you to see the stroke, so I would just soften that a little bit. So use it so it's just barely there, really watered down. And I don't do every single one. I'm just going to kind of skip around and do, shows up nice on those dark leaves. Again, if it was a really big leaf, I would be a little more careful, a little more deliberate. But here, these here especially are just in the background. These guys are just poking out. I want the focus on my pansies, not on every little leaf. But if it looks like it's kind of a bigger one or blank without it, sometimes it could just be a little line. Little bits of details are good. Don't want to go overboard. It'd be too busy of a painting. You want little places for your eyes to rest and between. So I would pick and choose some of these to do that. Veins on. Just gives it kind of a fun. Looking down here, we can just do some little ones. Sometimes they could just be just the little lines. Okay, that gives us time for our little metallic bits to dry. So now I'm going to just use, actually I'm going to say the same brush, same watered down white. I'm going to build up for some washy highlights on the metallic bits and then end up with some really nice heavy strokes. So I'm just going to go around here and just paint's a little thin still. Stop and start, just little bits of white. Again, don't think about it too much, just do it. It's acrylic paint. You can come back and fix it as much as you need to. Okay, so there, it's a little washier. It's little bits of lines almost. But what really is going to help make it look metallic, and now I'm dipping my little liner brush straight into my heavy white. I want it to be heavy and thicker. And sometimes I will just do a little dot. Sometimes it's a little dot and a dash. And I'm going to go along and just all my areas of the metallic. See, it's already starting to look a little more shiny, isn't it? Just the little touches like that. And if you want to look real careful at the reference photo, you can see a little more. You could blow that up and just kind of use that. And I do like little dots sometimes because those really make it like sparkle. And that could be enough, I think. Less is more sometimes. You just kind of sit back a little bit and it really looks like the edge. I'm going to separate. This little bottom is bothering me a little bit. I just, when I was doing my little shadows, I didn't really separate the little bits. I wanted to just kind of give that little shadow underneath again. And if any place else I think I need that, I could do a little wash. I could go in with a little wash if I thought I needed to deepen any of the shadows. I know I've put them on, gone over with the white. But you can you could be adjusting all the way through the painting. Oh, I did want to deepen up some of the lines, and I don't know why, but it looked kind of nice. So if I just take, you could use the chisel edge of a flat. I happen to have this in my hand. I'm going back in for my purple mix. I'm going to water that down. I want a little bit more purple, a little bit more of a divide in these little sections. So it's almost like a little purple stop and start. Maybe a little bit of purple. That's too much. I want like a little bit of pink maybe in there, just on that cup here and there. Okay, there we are. I think we've got our cup and saucer done. Oh, I want to put a little highlight on that again, though. Tablecloth. Now we're going to run and jump into the pansies. But just like we did those little highlights of white on our metallic trim, we got to do some on our cup too, now that everything's dry on it. So I could just go like a bright highlight right over that. Can you see that? Really I'm going to give it a little shine. And that just makes it look a little shinier. This is kind of bothering me a little, where that weird shape is there. Let me address that with some shading. It just looks like, it looks fine to me sitting here painting, but when I see it on the videos where I see the mistake, and that's a good idea to either take a photo of your painting or stand in front of a mirror with it. And sometimes something will pop out. It's just looking a little misshapen there. It's just, I don't know what it was, but I just wanted to reshape that a little bit. I sometimes like when I make a mistake, because then it gives you guys a, you can see how I deal with it sometimes. And I just want to get that shadow back in. I've gotten it almost too dark, because remember we did the shadows and we went over it with some of the white. It's water on my brush. I can scoot that out a little bit. And now I'm going to leave it, because I can always come back after and just address it if it needs to be. Okay, we have 3 different color pansies. One is kind of a blue-purple, one is more purple, and then we have a few that are the yellow. So let's lay those colors in so we kind of know what we're doing. And then I'm going to show you some little tricks to just highlight and shade to give them form and make them look like pansies. All right, let's see. I'm going to grab another flat brush. This is a good size here for me. Might need smaller for down here, but I'll just grab a couple brushes here. Okay, why don't we put in the yellow ones first, since they're the lightest, and we'll go and get the purpley ones. I just want to get the lighter shade in with a cleaner brush. And I'm going to take some yellow. I'm going to bring it, let's do this. I want you to see. I'm going to bring some yellow, a little of the yellow. The deep ochre is got good coverage. The yellow, again, very transparent. So I'm going to took a bit of yellow on my brush, but mostly it's the deep ochre. Kind of going to base them in, just kind of have a roadmap of where things are going to go. So this is going to be a yellow one tucked in behind there. I think I might take the tiniest little bit of white, just again to make it a little opaque, so you can see it there. This one peeking out over here as well is yellow. And then we have kind of a whole face here of this yellow one. Again, yellow ochre, a tiny bit of white, and some of the very yellow. Okay, so that just gives us an idea. Oh, this one down here, sorry. I'm always forgetting these guys. They're right in front of me, but. Okay, I'm going to rinse my brush off, and I'm going to do the same for all of them. Just so they're based in, we know where they are. We can see if we need to fill in some more greens here and there. We can do that afterwards. Let's go for that bluey, purpley one. It's mostly blue. I'm going to phthalo blue, a little white. But I need to get some quinacridone in there because it's a purpley blue. And I want to lighten it up because I don't want it to be that dark. So I'm going to get, let's see, that's very blue, but that's okay. Let's see. It looks like this little piece, one little bit peeking back here is the blue. This here is going to be a pansy that is a little different shape than the others. Here we got the petals, but we're going to do a little turned over leaf there. So it's got a little bit of a different edge. This one here, you can see I'm going right over some of the leaves a little bit. And that's okay, because I want the shape of the pansy to be on top of those leaves. Those were just little background bits. And my pansies sometimes have just 3 petals. Sometimes they have, let's see, more. But these guys here, this is going to be a whole one here. You can see it has what I'm going to call the tongue, is this like one coming out in the bottom. And then it has sometimes 2 back here, and sometimes I squeeze in 3. This is going to be a little bit of a blue one as well. Okay, so, and again, these I'm not going to worry about the perfect open shapes because they're kind of lying down. Now I'm going to just rinse that brush and get more purple. I'm just going to be more purple with these guys, but again, a little white because I don't want it too dark. And I want it to cover. So let's see, we've got a purple here. And again, we're just drawing the shapes really now. This one here, I know I need some leaves in here. That shape got a little wonky. I'm going to just make the shape of the pansy and worry about filling in some things around it after. I don't want to put that all purple and have a really weird big shape of a pansy. This one here is going to be, oh, and there's a little bit of a blue one behind here that I missed, so we'll do that after. This is why we're doing this little roadmap. They don't have to all be the perfect shape, and we don't want them all to be the same shape because then that would be a little boring. Got a little purpley one, a little pinky purpley one tucked in back here. That's got really pink, but I'm going to leave it. I kind of like having them different shades. It's kind of nice to dip into your colors as you go, so each one is a little different shade, so I can kind of dip here and there. Then we have one here that's purple. It's a little lighter, it seems. So why don't I make it a little lighter to start, just to make it a little different. Okay, we're going to add more leaves onto here after. There we are, except for the little blue one behind, which I forgot. Let's kind of get that in. It was simply a little petal peeking through. Okay, then we'll get our blue ones, our purple ones down below. We've got them on the cup here. Maybe I'll go a little pinker on the other one just so it's a little different. And again, remember, we're still, I'm trying to remember to let some of the pink from the base coat from the wash peek through. Okay, that's just a little blob, pretty much. You can always just add some of the other colors to each other just to mix it all up. And let's get started now. So they're all base coated in. And I'm going to come back because the more I look at it, I'm seeing a little, I might just do it now. I see a little weird shape there. I want that to be a little bit more this way. And I could do this at the end, but I sort of jump around when I'm seeing things and almost like a little bit more of a highlight. Yeah. Okay, back to pansies. Let's go ahead and do our yellow ones first. Again, I'm just going to get a flat brush. The edges of the pansy, let me just pull this over and show you what we're going to be doing. So we've just got our base coat on there. Look at how much lighter these are. But we need a little dark to start. And then we're going to go and use kind of a double-loaded brush to get a lighter edge. And then see the little strokes that kind of are line strokes? We can use the chisel edge or your little round brush and just kind of bring some of those in. It's going to end up with a shadow of a darker color coming out. And I'm going to use a little bit of a liner brush or a round brush to bring those out, ending with just a nice watery, inky consistency liner brush with just these few darks in the Payne's Gray after. So we're going to build it up. We're going to get the light on there first, then we're going to bring some of the light in, the white, and then we're going to do the little dark centers. finishing up with just this little teardrop shape of like a little orange teardrop. And then we pull in a couple of comma strokes that are kind of yellowy white on top. And then from a distance, that is going to appear to us as pansies. I didn't do as much detail on the ones down here because your focus is here. So let's get started. And what I'm going to need to do is kind of get the color we base coated in and side load a little white. But I'll show you another way to do it with just, if that's a little harder for you and you haven't really practiced side loading or have that down, we're going to do it a couple ways. So I'm going to show you both ways. Let's just get back in. And I think I'll need a little fresh color, especially for this yellow. I want to get the color that I base coated it in to start. So let me get a little more yellow out, a little clean yellow there. I might have enough, well, a little tiny fresh deep ochre because we've been working a while and the paint is drying up a little bit. So let me just get kind of a color here that we started. Can you see the palette there? Yeah, my palette's a mess. Get a little white in there. This is kind of the color we're going to load our brush on. Kind of the color that we used there. Loaded my flat brush right up. But now I'm going to go into my white. Can you see my white? It's way over here. Into my white with just the corner of the brush. Kind of like when we did a wash, only we just had water on the brush and pigment. This is just yellow paint and the white. But again, we always pat it off to blend. And then I can pick it up as I need to on the edge. And what I want to do is just kind of define the edges of these flowers. So I'm going to use the white towards the edge. Let me do one this way or a couple, and then I'll show you another way to do it. This just saves you time, and you can kind of go just with one stroke. And I think at this, what I'm going to do while that's still a little wet, take a little white on a little round brush. And to get that texture of it, the lines coming in, I'm just going to bring some of that white in. And I'm doing it now because the paint is wet. And it will blend. And I can come back later and bring a little more white in. Or even now, if it looks like it's a little just too beigey or light yellow and I want some white there. So that was just pretty easy with the one stroke. Let me do this one the same way. Then I'm going to show you on the big one another technique if you wish. So I'm just, again, loading up with the yellow that I have, dipping the corner into the white, and I'm just going to go around the edge of the petals. And if I find I'm losing some white, I'll add a little more to it. I wiggle it a little bit so that it gives a little bit of a natural petal shape. And you can either then go to your little brush, or sometimes I'll just use the brush I have in my hand on the chisel edge. And I might take a little more white and just bring some of that in. That's looking a little bit too bright to me, so I'm going to just tone that down with a little of the yellow paint. I went a little heavier on the white there. Okay, so if you want to take some time and stop and practice the stroke, again, you can just practice on a sheet of paper. But if it's not how you know, if you want to try it this way too, so you can just, I'm going to give, I'm just going to fill this in again with the color because it needs to be a little more pigmented. And you can always just trace around the edge now with your white paint, but do it quickly while this is wet. So it's just more steps. So if you can get down the side loading, it's kind of cool because you can do, you know, leaves in one stroke by side loading different colors on there. So I've just simply laid my color on. And I've added my white. I like to have this little tongue section in the front come all the way up here, really a little bit. And before that kind of dries, you could soften that with your round or a flat. So what you want to do is just not have this harsh line. So you can go along now and sort of just soften that, drying off the excess paint. But you'll find that it's really fun to learn that side loading technique too. But you can do it this way if you just lay on one color. And this is where I say I try to make my acrylics work like oils. If you were doing this in oil paint, you'd lay down your yellow, then you'd lay down your white. You could still do the side load method, but it would all blend so nicely for it. And you have time to play and fiddle with it and get it to blend. We're working with acrylics and it dries quick. I try to blend piece by piece if I need to while it's still wet, or use a lot of that double loading and shading because you kind of want to have it, that looks a little outliney. So now I'm just going to take a flatter brush and kind of just bring in a little white. But you can see how you're having to work back and forth. You're getting a little white in there, then you're going to go back and get a little of the yellow, whereas the one stroke, the technique really is quicker and easier once you get the feel for it. And it just takes practice. It doesn't have to be perfect. So this is one way where it's just laying all the colors down, then trying to blend them quick enough, or just doing it all in one stroke. We're still coming back to finesse this a little bit. It's not going to be ended up like this. We have some little, a little more highlighting and shading, of course. But so this little one down here, I'm just, again, loading with the yellow that I had. This is a big brush for that little flower, but I'm going to try it. I patted off my white a little bit. And let me just see if I can just kind of make a little shape here. So I'm just kind of wiggling it, make one petal. Kind of get this little one. Like I said, these ones down here, give yourself a lot of grace with, because these ones are just little smushed ones. They don't have to be perfectly shaped. That's enough for that. I'm going to wash a little orange in those too, just to get it a little goldier. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our other ones. It's just going to be a matter of mixing up some shades of the paint that we were using to base coat, and then using that with the side loading. If you wanted to, you could really save time, I suppose. I wanted to really see where things were going. But you could have, we were doing this part, we could have let it dry and then go back over it. We'd have all those colors mixed. I don't know. I kind of like just seeing where things are going. It's easy enough to mix the color again. And if your temperature and whatnot is not the same as mine, the paint wouldn't be drying so fast. And also there's the Stay Wet palette, which I use a lot. And I probably should have today, which keeps your paint workable for longer. I've done little demos on that and things. There is a Stay Wet palette you could buy, and they sell special paper and sponges, which is great. But I just take simply wet paper towels on a piece of glass or enamel or something, wet paper towels, and then a piece of parchment paper on top, just kitchen parchment paper, and that will keep your paints workable longer. So I probably should have done that today. But I'm going to just get a little more fresh color out if I need it here and mix up that bluey purple. We'll do those next. I have plenty of blue out. Let me just get some blue over here and a little quinacridone, which I have some. I'm going to try to use what I have. And then I'm going to get white because we wanted it a little lighter. And so these are my blue ones. So I'm going to load with that blue color and then a little bit of fresh white so I can just dip the tip of my brush into it. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little space there. And no, I'm going to make a mess. I was going to just do just the patting off of my brush on the tablecloth, but that's probably not a good idea. I'll probably make a big mess. So I'll pat it off a little bit. And I know it's hard to tell what's going to be exactly right. Too much white, not enough. That's where you just try it. You just put a little the white on there, pat it a tiny bit. If you come up and you don't even see your white, then just dip a little tiny bit more on there. So this little petal is just simply peeking out from behind there. Look at how quick I can make one petal. There was a little bit over here peeking out. And I'm going to do as many as I can in a stroke and then reload. So I've got this is where the folded over petal is going to be. So this is the petal. I'm going to take a tiny bit more white, and sometimes you might have to reload the blue and the white, but I'm going to take a tiny more just white now. And I'm going to make these petals. This little petal here is kind of there. And this is how we're going to make this other petal look turned over. We are going to just kind of put the white this way, and you can see that petal looks turned over now. Although, you know what I should do as I'm going? Let's just do this. Let's bring in these little lines as I'm going while it's still a little wet, just to give that pansy look to that. Kind of dry, but I can always take a tiny, tiny bit of white. Okay, so I'll get this again. I'm going to go a little more blue. I think it's time to reload. A little bit of blue, white on the edge. Do my little flower. These are still darker than what's on there. I'm going to go a little lighter still. Maybe I'll just grab a little more white too. That one is on top, so we'll do that. And when I said about the little front one that I call kind of the tongue, I kind of like to have that a little whiter right up there. And let's just get some texture here, get some of that white going in that right direction. Now, you know what I did do is I made them all really the same shade. I want to mix them up a little bit, but let's just get this little one done down here. Maybe I'll just go a little more pink on this one, just so it's not the same shade of blue as all those guys. again, these, I'm not worried about the shape so much. They're big, like little petals. A little more white on that one. Again, this is a big brush to do this. You might want to switch to a little smaller brush. And I want to take those little bit different colors. So I'm going to just take a little quinacridone maybe on one and just get a little more purple on some. You know what I mean? I just don't want them all the same. Okay, I'm going to continue on and do them all this way, and then we're going to come back and add some brighter whites on the edges, build it up. So I'm going to go more of my purpley here, get some quinacridone here so I can kind of go back and forth and get them a little different, a little white on the edge. I'm kind of looking at the tracing a little bit like this one is sort of behind. This little one is behind the rest. But you do see a little white on the edges, so let's just do that. That's very blue too. Let's get a little pinkier, a little bit pinkier. Okay, this one is on top, so we can go like right over everything there. I need my white back on the tip. Maybe I'll just get some of this. Just using the chisel edge and just pulling some of that white up. Okay, get these blobs going here. I want to get a little more quinacridone. I'm going to get a little fresh paint there. A little lighter. And my white on the edge. And this one is on top over here. Trying to follow the shape in the original, but you know, like I said, I was telling you not to worry about that to be the same, and here I am doing that. And that little tongue-shaped petal in the front, right kind of over this guy here. And get a little more purple, a little more pink. We've got this one. That came out very blue. I don't know where the blue came from there. Back into the purples. My brush wonky. Okay. And we can make one look in front of the other by just going with the brighter white right on top. And this little bottom one, just get that white to start up in there. You can see it's just way too much white because I've sort of neglected to put more purple back on my brush. Let's get some of this texture going on here. I might put some washes of blues and different things on the map just to get them all slightly different shades. This one is just kind of in between here. Let's just get some petals there. I think we did a little bit of that, but okay. And then these little guys down here, I am going to jump over to the smaller brush just to make it a little easier. Okay, we've got, we did those already, but I just want to get, oops, hang on. I threw my brush, my little tiny liner on the ground. Let me grab that. I just want to get some of this little line work on these guys. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush off. I'm going to go back to the yellow ones and get those a little bit finalized. So I want to get a little wash on there of some yellow ochre and some orange. I might just use a round brush. Let's see. And I'm just going to really thin down my orange, maybe add a tiny bit of yellow ochre to it so it's not too bright. I'm going to do a wash just to see how dark it comes out, and then I can always deepen it. So it's mostly dark all in the middles. And I kind of want to come out with those little line strokes in the direction of the petals. So I dab it in the middle there. It might fade and be too light, and I can go darker, but for now, I think that looks good. Even if they're just a little half of petals, you know, the half of the flower, just bring those out. You can see how I'm bringing them out with the little liner strokes. Let's see. Just, you'll see it more when I do it with the darker Payne's Gray on that too. But for now, it's just yellow ochre, yeah, and orange. Right in the middle. Just getting a little more color there. And now we're going to bring a little bit more white out. The colors, I think, dry a little lighter. And when they're dry, we kind of lost that oomph sometimes. You know how we started and it was way too white here, so we toned it down. Now I'm going to just go into my white, and I am watering it down so it's kind of like a wash. Again, we start that way, and if you need to add more pigment, you just add it. But I'd rather have you start a little lighter because I want it almost a little bit outlined. So I'm going to go right around my edge that I've done. I'm going a little bit around the edge. I don't want it to look terribly outlined, but that doesn't really because it's a wash. But if it was really heavy, you could bring some of the little strokes down. So let's just go ahead. And this is going to be much easier to see when I do the darker petals. So I'm kind of outlining my petals, going right into that center like the pansies do. But I don't want it to look terribly outlined. That's a little bit outlined. I just dry my brush and I'm going to just soften it. And when we put out, that's a little bright, but I'm going to leave it because it'll be fine in the end. So let's do this big one in front. So I'm going to go, and remember the shape of the bottom petal. So we've got that little pansy shape there. And I'm going to do the same on the other petals. We're just kind of outlining. Now, I don't want to do an outline if it's not on top. This one we're going to kind of make on top. So we're going to get a little brighter there. And these guys just come down to the next petal. It's the front one that kind of goes up and meets in that point. And I'm going to keep a paper towel here so that I can, while it's wet, pull in a little of that if it needs to. And I'm going to just go around and do all of them that way. Let's get that little one on the bottom done, that one last yellow one. But let's remember to get that even on this bottom one, we're going to go up and meet here. Bring it down a little so it's a little whiter on the edge. If you're, step back. If you want your pansies lighter or darker, this is your own preference. And we're going to do the same thing on all the other petals. I probably should have started on the darker one so you could really see what I'm doing. And a little more fresh white because I just want that to be clean and not too thick. So I'm going to just do the same to all those pansies. I'm going to water down my white. This one's on top, so let's start with the front so we get that right. We just start towards the center and go right up. That's the shape. That's way too outlined. I just scooted the paint off on my brush and just smudge that a little bit. And same, these guys just come down a little bit. If the petals are hidden behind something else, I wouldn't outline them so much. Here you can kind of give your petal some little frilly shapes. And just keep going. And let's see what's on top of one another here. So this is in the back. This is on top a little bit. This is a weird one. It's kind of just hidden behind there. Just maybe a little misshapen from being in the bouquet. but we still have that front petal, which we're going to just come up to that point and kind of just go down. Bring that in a little bit. This is kind of a little bit wonky here where it's almost not being able to tell what's on top. Let's just do that and come back and just, I'm going to either shadow or put a leaf in between here to fix that. That's a little trick. After, if there's some part you don't like, just add a little leaf on top. Okay, so this little one here, this is a big one. And a little one, I say it's a big one. Let's do the first one here. Got to get that bottom leaf. And while it's still wet, because it's very outlined, I want to smudge it a little bit. Just smudge the edge and maybe bring some of that in. Just kind of wetting my brush and just bringing that in to get that texture. And I'm going to leave this one behind. So I'm going to just do this edge here. Let's do this one coming down. And that's kind of behind. So let's kind of bring that down a little bit. And it's just, again, away. It's hard sometimes. It's easier for me because and we'll just work our way across. I find I'm getting a little thick in my outline line, so maybe I'll thin them in a little bit. Get this middle one up here. Let's get that on top. And the thing is to know kind of when to try to blend these before they dry. And it's drying fast on me, so I might just do that right now while I'm here. Sometimes I'll just wet my brush a little bit and just bring up what I just put down. It's just a way of softening the white edge into the pansy petal, just to make it look like more of a nicer blend. There's plenty of white on that edge. That's pretty good. I don't really have to outline it too much. We've got this little bit peeking back here. And you see they're starting to take shape. This is pretty bright here, but I can soften that. It's funny how my paint is really drying fast now. And I just want to make sure I get everything. And I even sometimes it dries a little bit, like it needs a little touch of white on some of these again. But let's just go through all of them. Just a little petal peeking back here. This is my turned over petal, so I want it nice and bright on that edge. And some places I want it to be that sharp edge, and sometimes I want to just bring those little petals in. That is probably okay for that. If we outlined every single one perfectly, it would be too much the same, too repeated. And if I did washy ones on all of them, it would still be too much the same. So I kind of like to sometimes have a little bit harsher line and then a little bit more blended. That's why I do a lot of these stop and start kind of strokes. Like it could be sharper there and then get blended. I just don't want it to always, don't want your eye to get bored, the viewer's eye. Here's another case of this front petal starting up there. And let's just make that a little lighter. Bring some of these in. As I'm bringing this in, if I find like, oh, it's just too dry, that's not too bad. But then I just can take a little water on my brush and really. And this guy, I'm going to put a little blue on this one after it's very purple. To make it unexpected, when your eye's traveling around the painting, you want to have some little unexpected surprises. So that's why it's the same, these two are the same shade of purple, so I will go and dab a little bit of maybe pink or blue or something on there just to make them different. And I try to keep that in mind as I'm painting when I'm dabbing into different colors, but sometimes I just don't get the differences I'm looking for. And so I can always go back. That's the great thing about acrylics. You can always go back. Now you want to, I'm going to take a little bit wider, just a little bit of a flat brush. You know, it's almost the same size as that. I could have used the round probably. I'm going to take some white. Again, to make it different on each one and not always the exact same pattern or color or look, I'm going to just take some white now that's a little bit watered down. And I'm just going to, here and there, make some areas a little bit lighter. Coming out from our little outlined edge in, maybe especially on some of these lighter ones. So it's just going to make it a little different here and there. Keeping that watered down if I need to. I don't want it to be too harsh, but I do want to have, I like that texture it's given me too. And this is exactly how I'm going to add some of the other colors to things. I can take my strong yellow now by itself with some of that white that's on my brush and just hit here and there on the yellow ones. And because this yellow is beautiful for glazing, which means just taking it straight even over what I have, and it goes over those little white bits, and look at how bright it brightens it right up. So just some primary yellow just stroked on. And that's good for the orange. We don't want to really stroke orange on our other colors, but we can take little shades of what we used on each of those, different shades of purpley. I can take just the quinacridone maybe as a little wash, and on some, just look at how that little glaze just brightens up some, and I might try it on some of the blues. So this is just going to make a little bit different shades on some of these. I'll go right into the blue now more. Really washy, and go on to some of the purpley ones just to get, this is going to be good here. So yeah, that looks much better to me because it's just different than that one. And I am sort of incorporating some of each color into the other, I guess is the simple way to say it. Maybe light blue. Let's see if I mix that with some white. That looks just like white. Let me get a little more blue on that. So just play with your colors. If you like it the way yours is, it might be just perfectly fine. And if you want to just kind of play around with just little touches of color in each one just to see how you like that. This one got to be a little bit too much. Okay. I think I actually missed this edge over here. And I'm going to go now in a few edges. Like if something's on top of one another here, I want that a little brighter. This one still I'm dealing with. I'm going to get that a little brighter on the yellow bit. So that yellow is clearly on top now. Get some of that yellow paint. Much better. And I can always throw that one behind by just putting a little shadow there if I needed to. I didn't get that detailed on these guys, but since that is it becoming a problem, if I just put a little shadow behind now, really sets the yellow flower forward. Just that little shadow there. Okay, I want to, again, just eyeball it all, see if there's any places where I want just some of my outlines is sort of all the same shade of white. I want to just kind of make some pop a little more. Just slight little outlines. See, I'm just sort of hitting it in places and moving on, hitting it and moving on. If my white line, when I put it on, had a little bit more water on it, it would turn now into like a faded white line. But look at how it's just dabbing on these little strokes and these little dots, almost strokes and dots here and there, make those edges of those petals pop. All right, now we are going to get into the dark bits for the center. And that's going to give it some depth in the middle there. I want a thinner, probably just a liner brush, I guess. Not the thin one yet. That's I'm going to use for the last. But now I'm going to go and do the yellow ones first, which means I want something dark. So I'm taking some orange and some of the quinacridone. It's going to give me kind of, ooh, I didn't mean to get blue in there. That's too dark for this shade. Okay, little orange right here. A little pink in it. And it kind of gives me an orangey maroon in the center. Start in the center there. Let me lift it up. And we're just going to come out like this. I'm going to add more water. I want it to be a little thicker than I really end up fine lines, but something like that. And thinning it down, though, because I want it to be not too harsh. So starting again in this little center, you can see I'm just following the shape of the petals, kind of. Same technique for the others, but we're just going to use a darker color than we used there. So I'll just rinse that off. And I'm going to just get a dark paint. I'm going to go right into the Prussian blue. That's pretty dark. If it's not dark enough, I'm going to add a touch of Payne's Gray to it. We can use the same shade for the blue and the purples. Start in the center again and just kind of pull out that center. Let's keep Payne's Gray because we'll Prussian blue. We'll do Payne's Gray next for some fine lines. That's pretty dark. It doesn't really show, but we'll still do it. These little guys, same thing. Just pull it out from the center. See how the depth, you're getting depth, you're getting the flower to look a little bit deeper in the middle. All the while, with these strokes that we're using, that just sort of mimics the way I see the pansies looking. So some flowers, I wouldn't be making these little line strokes so much. Now this one, we did the turned over petal, and it needs a little, has a highlight here, but it needs to be darker back here. So while I have that dark on my brush, let's just do that. Let's just get that little shade in there. Okay, this is just a peeking it up from the back, but we're going to get a little dark there. I'm adding drops of water as I go, just to keep this paint flowing nicely. I don't really think we're down deep enough for the center there, but I like the idea that this is in back, so we get a little shadow there. Things in front of things will cast a shadow on the thing. Okay. Oh, we forgot this little guy. No, we did it, I guess. Okay, now I'm going to the really fine brush. The really thin one, getting a nice bit of Payne's Gray here. So that's that almost black, but a little bit of blue in it. I'm going to do the same on all of them, even the yellow, a little of this dark. So I'm going to do right on top, just a few strokes out with the Payne's Gray. Not too many. I don't want it to be a big black blob in the middle, but just get those nice thin little shapes and little lines. Some here. And like I said, we're going to do the same thing for all of them. So just get those little, even on these little guys, just get a few in there. Harder to see, but it just deepens that little center up a little bit. And up here, you'll see them more. You can see the middle of the pansies sometimes are that very dark. All the way around. And that, I think we've got most of them. Let's see. Okay. The little centers, I just tie it all together. And I'm going to just take a little bit of orange. It's kind of an orangey red. Let's see what shows up. Let's try orange. And it's simply a little dot in the middle. Not really a dot. I almost like a little teardrop, like a push and pull. It's hard to see them on the a little bit on the yellow ones, but it's simply, and we're going to do a second coat perhaps because these are a little dark on the pansies there, which is a case where we can try a little dab of white in there to get them to show up more. See the difference there? Just a little dab of white. We still can see a little of the center in that one. I'm going to go down here with the orange with a little dab of white because you can't see it, and then now you can kind of see it. And I can dab really strong orange on top of that after we have that light base. Okay, so that's the little center. Now we do these little light yellowish comma strokes. So let me show you those. I'm going to just take white with a tiny bit of yellow. Sometimes they appear just as white too. That's okay. Let's just see. And this might be a good one to practice on. So it gets just this little 2 comma strokes like that. And I might tend to get a little more paint on my brush there. I've forgotten where I mixed that light yellow. There we are. You don't really see it there. These are tiny, but you can still do a little. Like I said, it doesn't really matter on these guys which way your direction is. Just. And now I want to go back and get those little, I'm going to do them almost a little bit of quinacridone pink now and see how that shows up. I want that little center to be a little bit of a eye catcher. So if I go back in now with just a little bit, just doing a little quinacridone, sometimes maybe orange if it doesn't show. I'm going to stand back and see what we need here now. Okay, well, that is pretty much it. Let's just take a look at our painting now and some things you could come and do if you wanted to. Now, I did this little shadow without really seeing where the flower was. So I think I need to fill in a little bit of some greens in places. So let's do that. Let's go and get our green mixed up again. And because the shadow extends over here and the leaf is only here, I'm just going to extend the leaf a little bit just so I have something above the shadow. Let me get a little brighter yellow for some of those bits. Brighter yellow with a little white really kind of makes our leaf show up. So there. So now the shadow makes more sense. It's underneath that. Same here. Let's just pull it out, make sure there's something where the shadow is. If the shadow needs to be brought back in, like under here, I don't see it anymore. I'm going to just go right back to my little nice square brush. And I want to just pop in the way we did it in the beginning. We took just a wash of the dark. And I just want to shadow under that. So if it's on top of something, we did put it in earlier to kind of guide us, but it needs to be a little more. If I've lost it anywhere here and I want to deepen it, I can do that. But I want to go into, I want some pink showing through, but I just want to dab in a little bit of green here and there where I might have some empty spaces, you know, just here and there. Leave it some pink, but just kind of dab it in so you don't have, it doesn't look unfinished. We can even make some little leaves like that are on top that can be like on top of a leaf. They can come out a little bit if there's an awkward little meeting place. And that just makes it look like some of the leaves are right on top, which gives it a little, making it a little bit more dimensional, I guess, you know. My saucer is really wonky on this one. The first one, it's a little wonky, but not quite as. If you've lost any of your pink and you want to put some little sparkles back in, I know sometimes the whole pink is not showing. I just go back in with a little pink, sometimes with the white to make it show. And if I lost it in solid, I could go and dab in some little bits of pink between things. It kind of brings it back. It's kind of nice. But basically, I think we're done. Let's take a quick look again. I think that is what we have done. I noticed my original ones, some are lighter. If you want, you can go back. I think this looks great, though. I think this looks great. But I just always like to show you little alternatives, like if you want to go back in with some pink, and other colors. I don't think it makes a big difference. Anyways, you guys, I think we're done with the Pansy still life. I hope you liked it. I hope you had fun painting along. If you have any questions at all, you can always reach out to me later on. And as you're painting, this is probably a good one to stop and start a little bit. And you can go, actually, you know what? I will go back now and do a few little brighter lights on my tablecloth because I kind of left it and to dry. But I do like to have it built up from the transparent to the opaque. I'm not going to go super opaque, but I will go back on some of these now and really get a little brighter just here and there. And I would build this up as much as I wanted to, just to, you can see how it just pops a little bit more. Okay, now I'm really done. Sign it, be done with it. And I can't wait to paint with you next time. So everybody enjoy your paintings. And until I see you again, happy painting.